Growing up, I always thought my sister and I would be each other's biggest supporters. We were only 2 years apart, practically inseparable as kids, sharing secrets under the covers and sneaking cookies when Mom wasn't looking. But somewhere between childhood and adulthood, something shifted. What used to be playful competition, who could run faster, who got better grades, slowly hardened into something sharper. For her, rivalry became the backbone of our relationship. For me, it was just exhausting. I wasn't blind to her jealousy. She had a way of turning every accomplishment of mine into something to minimize. If I aced an exam, she'd point out the one question I missed. If I landed an internship, she'd dismiss it as just luck. I tried not to let it get under my skin. I told myself it was just sibling dynamics, nothing serious. After all, she was family. And family is supposed to want the best for you, right? That belief was tested when the biggest opportunity of my life landed in my lap. A chance to interview for a position at a prestigious firm I'd dreamed about since college. It wasn't just another job. It was the job, the kind of position that could shape the rest of my career. When the email arrived confirming my interview, I remember staring at the screen with tears in my eyes. All the late nights, the extra classes, the projects I'd poured myself into, it felt like they had finally led to this moment. Naturally, I wanted to share the news. My parents were overjoyed, my friends sent me messages of encouragement, and then there was my sister. She smiled when I told her, but something in her eyes gave her away. It wasn't happiness, it was calculation. I brushed it off at the time, convincing myself I was imagining things. Maybe I was just nervous, projecting my anxiety onto her. But deep down, a small voice whispered that this was going to be different. This was the kind of milestone she wouldn't want to see me achieve first. Still, I didn't let the thought linger. I threw myself into preparation with everything I had. I researched the company's history, studied their recent projects, even practiced mock interviews late into the night. I knew how competitive the field was, and I wasn't about to let nerves or inexperience sabotage me. This was my shot, and I was determined to walk into that room ready to prove myself. My sister, meanwhile, hovered around more than usual. She asked questions, lots of them, about the interview, about what I planned to wear, even about the presentation I was putting together. At first, I thought she was being supportive in her own way. Maybe she was trying to show me she cared. But every now and then, her questions felt probing, almost as if she was collecting information rather than offering encouragement. Again, I shook off the unease. It was easier to believe she was finally stepping up as a sister than to admit she might still be playing the same old game of one-upmanship. Looking back, I wish I had trusted my instincts. Because as much as I wanted to believe in family loyalty, I had no idea just how far she was willing to go to make sure that dream job never became mine. In the weeks leading up to the interview, my sister's sudden interest in my career felt almost unsettling. She would pop her head into my room while I was practicing answers, nodding along with exaggerated approval. "Wow, you're really going all out for this, huh?" she'd say with a half smile. Sometimes it sounded encouraging, but there was always that sharp undertone, like she was mocking me instead of cheering me on. She even offered to help me practice for the big day. At first, I was touched. We sat at the kitchen table, and she asked me common interview questions. But the way she phrased them felt oddly twisted, designed to throw me off balance. When I stumbled over a tricky scenario she had concocted, she smirked and said, "Yeah, maybe don't say that in the real thing. They'll eat you alive." I laughed nervously, grateful for the feedback, but something about her expression told me she wasn't trying to make me stronger. She was trying to make me doubt myself. And the doubts began to creep in. Was I really prepared enough? Was I smart enough to impress a recruiter at such a high-level firm? My sister fed those insecurities in subtle doses, never outright saying I'd fail, but planting tiny seeds of fear in every conversation. Then came the little mistakes. One night, I asked her to quiz me using my printed notes. The next morning, I realized half the pages were missing. She swore she hadn't touched them, but I eventually found the sheets crumpled at the bottom of the recycling bin. Another time, I caught her borrowing my laptop just to check email, only to notice later that some of my saved company research had mysteriously disappeared. She shrugged it off as a glitch, but the timing was too suspicious to ignore. Friends I spoke to about the interview started acting strangely too. A close friend mentioned something I had supposedly said, that I wasn't sure I even wanted the job, that maybe I'd reject it if offered. I was stunned. I'd never said that. When I pressed, they admitted my sister had mentioned it in passing. My stomach dropped. She wasn't just messing with my prep. She was tampering with my reputation, making it look like I wasn't serious about the opportunity. Still, I told myself I was overthinking. I wanted to believe she was incapable of outright betrayal. After all, this was my sister. Family fights were normal, but sabotage, that felt too dark, too extreme. So I pushed the unease aside, clinging to the hope that I was just being paranoid. But late one night, as I rehearsed in front of the mirror, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the doorway. She was standing there silently watching me. No smile, no joke, just this cold, assessing stare, like she was studying her competition. When she noticed me looking, she quickly plastered on a grin and said, "You're gonna crush it!" before disappearing down the hall. I wanted to believe her words, but it was the look in her eyes that stayed with me. A look that said she wasn't rooting for me at all. She was waiting for me to fall. The morning of the interview felt like a test I'd been preparing for my entire life. I woke up early, ironed my suit, and double-checked my portfolio. My stomach fluttered with nerves, but underneath was excitement. This was it. The day everything could change. My sister hovered nearby, unusually helpful. She brewed coffee for me, offered to review my notes one last time, even double-checked the address for me. "You don't want to be late," she said with a grin, scribbling it on a sticky note before handing it over. Something in me hesitated. Maybe I should confirm it myself, but the clock was ticking, and I didn't want to spiral into paranoia again. I thanked her and tucked the note into my pocket. That was mistake number one. By the time I arrived at the location, something felt wrong. The building was nearly empty. No polished glass doors, no receptionist in sight. I asked a security guard, and he gave me a confused look. "This is a storage facility, not an office building." My heart dropped. I scrambled to check my phone, searching for the email with the original address. My hands shook as I realized the sticky note had the wrong street number by several blocks. I bolted back toward the correct address, panic rising in my chest. Sweat prickled under my collar, and my polished appearance was unraveling fast. By the time I finally reached the real office tower, I was already 15 minutes late. But the nightmare wasn't over. As I pulled out my portfolio to collect myself in the lobby, I froze. The neatly arranged documents I had prepared, resume copies, work samples, reference letters, were a mess. Pages were out of order, some bent, and 2 key documents were missing entirely. I knew I hadn't left it like this. My throat tightened as I imagined my sister's late-night help when she had offered to organize everything for me. And then came mistake number 3. I glanced down at my shirt, and a faint but unmistakable stain spread across the fabric. Coffee. The coffee she had so sweetly made for me that morning. I had been careful, or so I thought, but somehow a splash had soaked through just enough to show. The humiliation was complete. My reflection in the glass doors revealed the image of a flustered, sweaty candidate with rumpled papers and a stained shirt, hardly the poised professional I'd envisioned. Behind the scenes, I could almost picture my sister at home, smug and satisfied, convinced her plan had worked. She had always known how much this interview meant to me, and she had made sure I would walk in looking like a disaster. Every step toward that elevator felt heavier than the last. My pulse pounded in my ears. Each floor I rose was another reminder that I was about to walk into the most important interview of my life, already defeated. When the elevator doors opened, I clutched my disorganized folder to my chest, took a shaky breath, and stepped into the waiting room with my heart sinking to the floor. The receptionist called my name, and I stood on shaky legs, clutching my mangled portfolio like it was a lifeline. My throat was dry, my palms damp, and every instinct screamed that I had already lost. I imagined the recruiter's polite smile turning to disappointment the moment they saw me, rumpled, late, and completely unprepared. When I stepped into the interview room, I braced for that reaction. But instead, the recruiter, An impeccably dressed woman with sharp eyes studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not annoyance. Not impatience. Something else. "Rough morning?" she asked lightly, almost as if she already knew. Heat crawled up my neck. I apologize for being late. There was a mix-up with the address, and then my materials—" I held up the folder helplessly. She leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against her notepad. "Funny you mention that." Her gaze lingered on me for a beat before she set the pen down. "I'll be honest, I've been looking forward to this conversation. But before we begin, I think we should clear the air about something." My stomach tightened. This was it. The rejection. The confirmation that my sister's sabotage had destroyed everything. I opened my mouth to apologize again, but she raised a hand. "You're not the first candidate we've interviewed whose family complicated matters," she said carefully. "But in your case, we already know the truth." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. The truth? The recruiter's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Let's just say your sister wasn't as discreet as she thought. Someone on our team overheard her a few days ago, bragging about how she planned to throw you off before your interview. Wrong addresses, tampered notes, even the coffee trick. She didn't exactly hold back." My heart skipped a beat. Relief and disbelief warred inside me. All those paranoid suspicions I had pushed aside, they had been real. She really had tried to destroy my chances. And somehow, against all odds, the recruiter already knew. I let out a shaky laugh, half from nerves, half from sheer astonishment. "So you knew all along?" She nodded. "We did. Which is why we didn't hold your tardiness or the missing documents against you. In fact, I'm impressed you showed up at all. Many people would have walked away after facing obstacles like that." Her words washed over me like a lifeline. For the first time that day, I felt the ground steady beneath me. Someone was finally on my side, and not just anyone. A recruiter who held my future in her hands. But even as relief bloomed in my chest, suspense lingered. If they already knew my sister's games, what did that mean for me? Would they still give me a fair shot? Would they confront her? Or was this just a sympathetic pat on the back before letting me go? The recruiter folded her hands on the table, her eyes gleaming with something sharp, almost mischievous. "Now," she said softly, "the real question is, what should we do about your sister?" My breath caught. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was about to become something much bigger. The recruiter's words hung in the air like a loaded gun. "What should we do about your sister?" I blinked at her, unsure how to respond. You mean you'd actually confront her?" She leaned forward, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "We take integrity seriously here. If someone goes out of their way to sabotage a candidate, especially a family member, it tells us far more about their character than about yours. And as it happens, your sister reached out to us directly." My stomach dropped. "She what?" The recruiter pulled a printed email from a folder and slid it across the table. My hands trembled as I read the words. It was from my sister, written in a fake, concerned tone and warning. The company that I was unstable, unreliable, and not truly interested in the position. She even attached a few doctored screenshots of my supposed messages doubting the company's reputation. I felt sick, but the recruiter was watching me closely, her expression calm. "We're not fools," she said. It didn't take long to verify the truth. Our IT department traced the files back to her device. And those messages? Obviously fabricated. Heat rushed to my face. Rage, embarrassment, disbelief all swirling together. But then the recruiter's voice sharpened. "So here's what we did. We invited her to join us for a short conversation. Before I could ask what she meant, the door opened. And there she was, my sister, led in by another staff member. She looked nervous but tried to mask it with her usual smirk. That smirk faltered when she saw me sitting across from the recruiter. "Please, have a seat," the recruiter said smoothly. "We thought it best to clear things up together." The color drained from my sister's face. She stammered something about being misunderstood, about just trying to protect the company. But the recruiter cut her off with icy precision. "We don't appreciate liars. We don't appreciate sabotage. And we certainly don't appreciate people who try to manipulate our hiring process for personal grudges." Every word landed like a hammer blow. My sister's bravado cracked. Her excuses grew weaker. And finally, The recruiter delivered the final strike. You've wasted our time, tarnished your sibling's reputation, and attempted to commit fraud. We'll be forwarding this incident to the appropriate channels. Her eyes widened. Wait, fraud? No, this was just a mistake. But there was no escaping it. The humiliation was written all over her face. For once, I didn't feel small under her shadow. I felt free. Then the recruiter turned to me. Her tone softened. As for you, you handled yourself with grace under pressure most people couldn't endure. That resilience is exactly what we look for. The job is yours. If you still want it, I could barely breathe. My chest ached with relief and triumph as I nodded. Yes, absolutely. The recruiter extended her hand, sealing the moment. Across the table, my sister sat frozen, pale and speechless. For once, she had no clever retort, no smug remark, just silence. Walking out of that office, offer letter in hand, I felt the weight of years of rivalry lift. Justice had finally been served, and it had never tasted sweeter. In the weeks that followed, my life felt like it had finally shifted onto the right path. I started my new job with the kind of determination only forged in fire. Every morning when I walked into that sleek glass building, I felt a mix of pride and relief, because I knew I hadn't just earned this position, I had fought for it. Clawing my way past obstacles most people couldn't even imagine. The work was demanding, but I thrived on it. Late nights in the office no longer felt like drudgery, they felt like purpose. My ideas were respected, my voice carried weight, and my resilience was valued in a way it had never been at home. Slowly, I began to see myself not as the lesser sibling constantly battling for approval, but as someone entirely independent of that toxic comparison. As for my sister, her world crumbled faster than I expected. The recruiter hadn't been bluffing. She followed through with reporting the incident. Word spread quickly in our community, and my sister's reputation took a serious hit. The part-time job she had was suddenly no longer a fit, and her friends, those who had once laughed along with her digs at me, distanced themselves when the truth came out. She had always thrived on being the center of attention, but now the spotlight only exposed her flaws. At home, the tension was thick. My parents were devastated when they learned what she had done. For the first time, their sympathy leaned toward me instead of brushing aside her behavior as just jealousy. They tried to talk sense into her, but she refused to take responsibility, insisting she had only been trying to help. The excuses rang hollow. The damage was already done. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a sting of guilt. She was my sister, after all. Part of me wanted to believe she could change, that maybe this humiliation would be the wake-up call she needed. But another part of me, the part that had endured years of her undermining me, knew better. Some people don't want to change. Some people can't stand to see others rise because it forces them to face their own failures. And that's when I realized something important. Revenge isn't just about watching someone fall. It's about reclaiming your power after they've tried to take it from you. For so long, I'd let her dictate how I saw myself. But standing on my own, succeeding on my own terms, and knowing the truth was finally out, that was the real victory. I don't know what my sister's future holds, and honestly, it's no longer my burden to carry. I've moved on, surrounded by people who value honesty, hard work, and loyalty, the kind of values she could never understand. If this experience taught me anything, it's this. Betrayal cuts deep, but resilience heals deeper. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't watching your enemy burn. It's thriving so brightly that their shadow can never touch you again.